Welcome to PRSL Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 408.
Yeah. An update episode. That's usually what you say, right? You usually say we're doing an update episode.
I was like, what did I miss? And then I'm like, oh.
It's only been a week since we recorded Orlando, but man, it's been a crazy week, right?
For a moment, I was trying to think of something like, funny to say, and then it just didn't come through. And
yeah, we gotta wait till 409, and then you get the fun, song and cleaner and all that.
Who even knows that? That's like Gen Z, Gen Alpha.
Knows,
no one knows.
All right. So anyways, welcome guys to PRSL Podcast. So we're on episode 408, and today is an update episode. So the way our podcast typically runs, every single Wednesday, we are dropping a long-form podcast on anywhere you can get your podcast and on YouTube. On Mondays, we tend to go live. If not, there's at least some kind of a YouTube video going up, so make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Hit that bell notification so you're getting notifications. And then on our Wednesday episodes, we alternate between topics we're talking about and then just updates in general about reselling, what's going on in the reselling world, what's going on with us reselling. So today's one of our update episodes, and so we're going to be talking about like things that are happening for us reselling, what's going on in the reselling world. We'll give you our spicy bolos, and that's what we're going to be doing today. Orlando, how are things going for you, man?
I'm in a weird stage in my reselling life, just because I got to tell you, I've said this many times, I am burnt out on eBay, but I'm not burnt out on reselling. So I still like finding cool things. I still like listing cool things. I just don't like to put in the work right now. That's kind of where I'm at. And part of that is because, I have other opportunities around the corner, and I'll speak in that in the coming weeks. I'm still going to be reselling. I'm still going to be out there, but I'm kind of just like, I find that I'm just, I don't know. I'm just kind of done. And so, I'm not done, but you get those moments, right? It's funny because this time last year, things were really good. I remember like reselling was taking off. Like I had this like lull, and then like all these huge sales kept happening, and I got out there, and it's been interesting in San Diego too, because it's been really hot lately. Usually it doesn't get hot in San Diego until about mid-August into September. But this July, it's been close to 100 almost every day. And so, the thing that I like to do is garage sales the most. And there really hasn't been much in garage sales. I've actually gone out, 2 out of the last 3 Saturdays. And I thought about posting on social media, on Instagram, but there wasn't much to post, right? Maybe picked up 2 or 3 items. And I know part of it is like, I would post sometimes and people would be like, thanks for keeping it real. And I like doing that too, but how many times are you going to keep posting like there isn't much out there, right? So I haven't been doing too well in the garage sales lately, and I think part of it is it's just hot and people just don't want to be outside. There's an interesting one though. I went to one estate sale and it was incredible. Like it was probably, I don't know if the guy was trying to build a museum or he was a reseller. You just don't know sometimes. But this guy had so much stuff, had old school lanterns, those railroad lanterns I like picking up, had a bunch of like old tools, had old radios, had different rooms, had like a game room and it was all games, and had a toy room and it was all toys, and had a Western room and it was all Western. But here's the problem. It was all fully eBay priced. Not even like discounted eBay, it was full eBay price. And they actually said that in their listing that they were going to be comping with eBay. So I'm there and I see a couple of other resellers, and this is before I knew all that. I saw it in the listing, but I thought maybe they won't be able to do it on everything, right? Because there was a lot of stuff. And I asked them, I'm like, hey, like, have you been able to find anything? They're like, no, Orlando, it's all like, it's all full priced. Like there's no profit to be made. And then I even remember, like, sometimes a good tip is if you're trying to really gauge how things are going is, on an estate sale, there's the table where you check out. So what I do is I meander around that area and I just listen to what's going on. Like, do people offer? And if they offer, are the estate sales people willing to negotiate? And sometimes you can tell right away because they'll say, no, we don't negotiate. This is what the price is. Or sometimes you do hear and they'll say, no, we're only offering 10% off. Or if you spend more than 100, you get 25% off, something like that. So I'm listening in and there is 0 discounts given, and I thought, this is crazy. So this could have been the score of all time, but it just wasn't. And as I was, touring the place and looking at stuff, I even heard them say, "Oh yeah, we were price tagging everything for 4 weeks before we did the sale." So it kind of was. There's two sides to look at it. The one side is obviously this is not a place I'm going to go to again. Like I'm not going to come back, and it's just not worth my time. So sometimes you got to figure that out. Like it's just not worth your time. Now there is that rare occasion where you find something that they miss, so that can happen. But you got to really. You got to kind of read the room and see how long do you actually want to spend looking for that item. The other side is
I was gonna say, you know what we almost need to do, or not we, but I've never seen anything like it. Like they've got Storage Wars, they got Pickers, they've got all these different shows. There almost needs to be like a reality show of like the people who run estate sales. Yeah. And like how they are, marking things and haggling with people. Because I mean, you just wonder. I mean, every company is going to be different. I know when I'm looking up, certain estate sales that I want to go to, there's certain companies where it's like, yep, no, not going to that one because I just know that they're brutal. They catch everything. They overprice things, whatever it is. And then there's other companies where it's like, yeah, they're fair. They're gonna like try and discount things because they want to move stuff. And then obviously the best ones are when it's just family running it and not a company running it. But yeah, you almost wonder, like, are these people, what do they do on the side? Like, are they resellers on the side? Are they picking the best items? Like, how are they pricing all this stuff so well or not so well? Like, it would be an interesting show, I think.
My question is, what do they do with this stuff if they don't sell it? Because I've had back in the day, I used to have connections where estate sales, like companies would call me and be like, hey, Orlando, we have a bunch of stuff. I know you like, this stuff. We're willing to make a deal. We kind of just need to offload it. I don't get those calls anymore, just because I think a lot of those went under. A lot of those businesses don't exist because I don't see them anymore. But the reality is, like, they have only so much of time to sell the items. So what do they do in the end? Now, there is that guy before the final liquidation, which I've been, where they contact that guy and he buys it. Instead of pennies on the dollar, he'll buy it for like a dime on the dollar, whatever it is. And then the pennies on the dollar guy shows up. But man, it was just crazy. It was just crazy. Now, the other thing that was crazy for me this last week is I did not list for 7 days. I kind of was just done. Like, sales weren't coming through, and I'm just like, you know what? I just don't want to deal with it. Like, I'm just done. And luckily, I did have a little bit of cushion. Obviously, when you go full-time reselling, you want to make sure that you have money in case things get bad, right? And to bring that up, let's take it even a step further. What happened? Do you remember what happened with CrowdStrike this weekend? Did you catch the news about that?
Yeah, that was pretty wild. I didn't. Luckily, I'm not at work right now, and none of my servers or anything were affected. But yeah, I mean, there were certain things that I know people were affected by it, and I know like all over the world there was tons of impact on that. Did anybody notice any impact on like eBay or any of those servers? Okay,
so before we go into that, there wasn't. But before we go into, I want to make sure people that are listening, they maybe have no idea what we're talking about. But over the weekend, I believe CrowdStrike, their servers, right? They're some company.
No, I think they pushed out an update to their software,
but they have servers. Yeah, they pushed out an update and it bricked, basically shut down systems throughout the world. So a bunch of airlines ended up having to end all flights. All flights were canceled for like an entire day. Banks, I know for myself, I remember I went to get out money from my garage sales, and like it was like, you have insufficient funds. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And when I looked, and I had a big check that I deposited the day before, and it didn't go through because of the CrowdStrike thing. And Chase was one of those banks that were affected, because I have a separate account where I keep my capital for reselling. And I was like, what? I was wondering, like, did somebody hack my account? And sure enough, it's because of the CrowdStrike. Like, a lot of people didn't get paid on Friday. You also had entire systems that shut down. And I remember we had an episode, I don't know how long, maybe a year ago, where I had talked about what if we get hit with an EMP, right? And a lot of people thought I was crazy, right? I said, what if worse comes to worse and you can't do anything? There's no eBay, there's no Poshmark, Mercari, everything shuts down. What are you going to do? Like, and you had mentioned, like, if it ever gets to that case, like, we're not going to be worrying about reselling anymore, which is valid. But in this scenario, luckily, eBay was still running fine. I still got a lot of sales that day. Things were good. But it really makes you think, like, what are you going to do, right? Are you going to run a garage sale? You can't do local deals, right? Unless OfferUp still operates. Like, the thing with this was, Luckily, eBay didn't get hit. I had, eBay had zero, as far as I know, had zero impact on eBay because I still was getting offers. I still had sales coming through that day. But it made me think about that. Like you got to figure out, those of you that are full-time resellers, what are you going to do? What if eBay goes down for a week? What if it goes down for a month? Like you got to have some kind of contingency plan on how to move items, or at the same time, you got to make sure that you have some kind of savings or some kind of way to get cash to be able to still take care of things. So that's what I was thinking about during that whole CrowdStrike thing. Luckily, eBay was not affected. Now, going back to the 7 days of no listing. So despite no listing, my sales were the same. Nothing changed. And so I got in this terrible habit of like, I'm going to go spend time with my kids. Like, I'm not going to list. I'm going to enjoy this summer. And sure enough, things were fine. And things are still fine. So I truly believe that listing every day does not make a difference. Do I think you need a list? Yes. I think eventually there comes a point where if you're not listing, your store may die. But I don't know when that point is, right? I have no idea. I remember when Scavenger Life, when they're minimizing what they're doing on eBay and they're doing more, they bought like a coffee shop and they're doing all this thing, doing all these different other things. They had stated that they just didn't list for like a long time and they still had sales coming through. And so that's kind of like the beauty of eBay at times too, is that you don't always have to be on it. But at the same time, I say that in one side of my mouth, and the other side I'm going to say, well, eBay's a grind and you have to continue listing or else you're not going to be able to get sales. So what am I saying in all this? I'm saying is that no one has the answer. No one truly knows. Now, there is one catch, I think. The one catch is if you sell the same thing like all the time, like you just do vintage t-shirts or you just do vintage toys or vintage video games and you have that market, you have that clientele, I think that's how you get consistent sales. If you're an everything seller like Mike and I think it's very unpredictable, right? Because people that are coming into your store are usually not the same people coming to your store. And that's been my experience. I have a lot of repeat buyers, but it's on very niche fields like Hawaiian shirts or certain kind of vintage toys or certain kind of stereo equipment. But overall, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, what's going to sell, what's not going to sell, and how to be prepared for various situations. I mean, the thing we've said from the very, very beginning is you have to adapt, right? Like adapting is going to be key. And it's hard because as an everything store seller, you're in a good position because you tend to have a little bit of everything that people might be looking for. So your store is not going to necessarily be hit as hard. Like if you're in a specific market that might be doing really well, and then all of a sudden that market shifts and changes, and you've got all of your eggs in one basket, to use the popular phrase, man, you're really going to feel that hit. However, if you're an everything store like us, I mean, you're probably going to see ups and downs, but if your store is kind of diversified, you're going to do okay in that sense. But it's tough because right now, I mean, you never know what's going to be selling. And yeah, as things get more interesting and rough and like I'm even thinking back to what you said, like what if things go down? Like I mentioned when AT&T went down here in the Texas area, this is several months ago now. And it might have been like outages across the nation too, but I know for sure in like our area there was a huge AT&T outage. And yeah, it's like, what if it was Visa? What if it was something you couldn't get your money? So yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing there.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. And one last thing I just want to add is I actually went to the thrift with my son, and again, I want to remind people, when you first start reselling, it is tough. It is tough finding good items to sell, right? So I went to a thrift store with my son, and I said, hey, for the next hour and a half, whatever I source, it's going to be yours. Like, you can list it. It'll be for your store. And then you go source what you want. So we ended, after an hour and a half, and I had like 105 items, and he had like 10, right? And I thought, wow, like, this is the difference, right? This is what 10 years brings, right? And so if you're new and you're out there and you're like, I just can't find stuff, that doesn't mean it's not out there. It just means you have to extend your knowledge base, right? That over time you will get better. And the other thing I learned from that was the stuff that I sourced for my son, I was very big on sell-through rate. Like, I didn't want him to waste his money because he's trying to recoup this money to be able to pay off his college. And so I wanted to make sure that he had stuff that he can get cash on pretty quick. And I got to tell you, like the stuff I bought him, like, and he ended up listing, he was selling pretty fast, pretty good. And I go, wow, I wonder if I should just start a brand new store. Right? Because I'm pretty sure what's weighing down my store, and I've said this many times, is that I have a lot of items I shouldn't have in my store. Now, I am down to, I think, around 2,800. So I went from almost 3,500 a year ago to down to 2,800. My goal is to get it to under 2,000 by the end of the year, and eventually be at a place where I only have like maybe 800 items in my store. That's it, because I have so much stuff selling that I don't have a massive store. And I know everybody disagrees. Not everybody, but there's some people that are like, no, you need to have a store like Auction Professor, who has, I think he has like 40,000 items. There's somebody else I watched the other day. I think they have like 50,000 items or something. And that works too, right? You got to find the model that works for you.
Yeah, a big part of that model figuring out is what you can source, right? Like, and how, what kind of sell-through rate you can have. So if you're in a position where you can guarantee to source the exact amount of items that you need profit-wise to make ends meet that month to reach your target, and month after month I can source $4,000 gross worth of sales, or 5,000 or 10,000, whatever that number is for you, and I'm going to net X amount. But the reality is a lot of people aren't in that position, which is kind of why when we both first started, it was build the store, right? Like the model was, I'll source what I can now, and knowing some of this stuff. I mean, obviously we've talked about the long tail items isn't necessarily ideal, but yeah, if I can build the total amount of inventory I have, then if I'm only able to source $500 worth of inventory over this next week because of whatever reason, I'm going to be fine because I have this big backlog and stuff is going to be selling. So, I still think that unless you can guarantee that you're going to be able to source enough each month, having a backlog of items in your store, as long as they're items that are going to move and they weren't bad purchases, is probably in a lot of ways still a better route to take.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. That's a good point. That's something you need to think about. But if you're able to consistently get those sell-through, those fast sell-through items, I would just do it. I wish I could. I wish, and I do, and I don't, right? Because the fact that I was able to not list for 7 days and still get sales, well, that's because I had a bigger store, right? If I had that smaller store, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have happened, right? So you got to figure out what works best for you. So that's pretty much for me. What's going on with you, Mike?
So big news. So how a few months ago on the podcast there was the chicken sounds in the background.
Yeah.
And it bugged a couple of people. I changed the way I was editing the audio and I couldn't get it out. But anyways, I have my first 2 eggs.
Oh, there you go.
My chickens laid eggs. So I just want to, since our listeners are kind of invested in the chicken story because they heard the chicks, they were forced to listen. We had some funny comments. We had some people who mentioned that like they didn't realize that it was like chicks chirping in the background of our podcast, and so like they spent like they were listening to the episode while they're listening, and they're trying to figure out. They thought there was, one person said like they thought there was like a bird in the wall or something, so they're like looking, trying to find it. So anyways, for all of you who are wondering, I've got my first eggs. They're coming, so things are going well with that. But yeah, so reselling wise, it was kind of an off week for me. I mentioned on the last podcast that we did, the last update episode, that what I was looking forward to is kind of getting through a lot of my death piles and not necessarily sourcing as much. And I kind of stuck with that. I was able to get through quite a bit of my death piles, but that kind of got put on hold because I've got some family coming into town, and because I've got this gym / eBay office podcast area now is climate controlled with my air conditioner in here. It is an area where we could actually put some people to sleep in. So I had to like tear down a lot of my light box and my table and all my totes I have laying around with death piles. And I kind of had to clean all that up so that it's a usable space for other people. And so that kind of put a little bit of a hamper on how much I'm able to be listing and just going through that process. But it was still a good process because it allowed me to focus on what are the items that I've got listed. Are they in the right spot? Prioritizing and not just throwing death piles in another pile, but okay, let me actually organize my death piles so that when I set everything back up, I'm ready to go. Because efficiency is everything, right? If you're spending minutes and minutes and minutes trying to get into a groove and a system, that starts to add up over time. So I think I'm actually, once I get rolling again, should be good to go. I didn't do as much sourcing because my mindset was kind of on let's get through death piles. But I did go another time to the Amazon return store. I've been doing really well there, but I knew I wouldn't have as much time. I found that the trick with that place is you got to be there when they open. Like, you got to be walking through the doors before they tell you can take the blankets off the tables and start looking through items, because they, like, the nights before, they're really big on social media here. So the nights before, they'll record what they have like on the tables before they cover them. They'll start showing stuff. So they tend to kind of stage the items so that the best items, I think most of the best items they have, end up on that first run on the top. So you kind of got to be quick. And so it's a bit of a gamble as far as where am I going to stand? Am I going to, it's a little bit of luck of the draw. Am I going to pull this blanket and be standing at the spot that has the good stuff? Or was it the bin over and I missed it, because you don't get to see. But this last time I went, I'm there, I pull it, and man, right off the bat, I'm seeing a couple of good things. So I'm like, and you can't tell for sure because you got to do a lot of research on the items you're picking up. But the key is everyone just starts filling their basket. Like, if they see something that might be possible, even things that are just boxes that you can't tell what they are yet, everybody around you is just filling their basket as fast as they can with stuff, and then they look at that stuff later. And that's actually a good strategy. And I've kind of adopted that strategy as well. And I knew I wouldn't be able to be there as long. And even though the key is to be there when they first open, if you really want to be successful, you kind of have to wait long enough where people start returning items that they decided they didn't want. Because a lot of the good stuff that they don't know is valuable or they're just picking up for themselves starts to make it back in. So it's around the second to third hour that you'll really start to find almost like a replenishment of like good items coming back, because people will take their stuff over to the box opening section. They'll have the box open. They'll decide like, why do I want this thing, right? And then so they put it back, and then it ends up getting back into the bins. And that could be a profitable thing because not everybody there is a reseller. Not everybody's trying to resell the same things. So I knew because my son had some doctor's appointments, I wasn't going to be able to be there long enough to hit that third, fourth hour. I was only going to be able to be there for about an hour and a half or so. So I kind of had to get lucky on what I grabbed. So, man, I felt like I had that high going of like, I got it. I'm getting good stuff because I picked up a box of like microphones with like a condenser unit in it and like all these like things that seemed very profitable. And then I walk over to the side, and after I did my whole route and I went through all the bins, I'm like, all right, I literally have a cart full of items, and I feel good about these items. And then I start researching them, and I'm like, nope, not this one. Oh, dang, this one would have been good, but you could tell like it's been used, or oh man, this is the wrong brand or the wrong model. And I literally had to put back almost everything. It was like such a gut-wrenching feeling. It was really, really frustrating. But it's one of those things where there is a bit of a gamble, right? Like with that method where people are just pulling stuff, you've got to kind of get lucky. And that's where the mentality that we've talked about over and over on the podcast of consistency comes in. Is you're not going to always get lucky. You're just not. Like, you can go every week and maybe once a month you get really, really lucky where you pull that cloth and the first 3 items that are within reach of you are items where you're going to make several $100s of profit, right? Or you can be there long enough consistently and still get lucky where people are putting stuff back and they didn't see the value in it. But if you're only relying on like every single time I'm going to be able to make it, it doesn't work that way. It kind of has to like be a longer, like you got to zoom out. If you just zoom into one day and say like, hey, I only made $100 profit this day at this place, this is just not worth it. Well, it might not be that one time, but maybe the next time you go, you'll make $200, and then the next time you go, you make $1,000, right? So after 3 times, you've made like $1,300. That evens out over those 3 times. So you kind of have to zoom out and think consistency, because when a little bit of luck is involved, and there is a luck element to reselling. Did you go to the right garage sale? You might have done all your research and you showed up and somebody was there before you, or they just opened up the box that had the super expensive item and you opened up the box that had the cheap one. Or it flips, right? So it's just luck is an element when it comes to reselling. But the great thing is consistency is what allows you to guarantee you're going to hit that luck eventually. And so you kind of have to zoom out, take a wider picture, which is why I kind of unless you have a source that you can guarantee to pick up certain items, like I have a source where I'm basically almost doing like a private label on something, or like I'm getting car parts from this place, or I'm getting, whatever it is, it's really tough to think like I'm going to guarantee that I'm doing the fast nickel approach because I'm going to be able to source $300 worth of items every single day and 5 days a week. And that's what I need in order to make ends meet, because it's not always going to be that way. Now, again, if you zoom out, it might average out to that over the course of a month. But I think there has to be an element of you kind of have to price things and allow your store to build up to an extent, like we were talking about earlier, still with the mindset of I'm trying to move this stuff quick. But I just think, like you said, there's times you go out and you just don't find what you're looking for. I did find one thing that was kind of funny, and it was in that very first bin, and I watched a guy lift a box and he didn't even look underneath it. So what a lot of people will do at these places is they look at all the boxes on the top, because usually it's like the small cheaper stuff that like falls to the bottom, just like if you take a cup full of rocks and you shake it and it's got sand in it, the sand works to the bottom. Like the smaller stuff moves to the bottom of these bins. And so people are looking at all the big boxes, and he moved over and I just pushed the box that he looked at aside and like something else. And there was a brand new Stanley cup, one of those ones with the straws that is like really popular. All the girls have them. It's like a pink one. Okay. And man, it was so funny because I knew it was a semi-profitable item. For $8, it wasn't like the steal of a century by any means. They're like $40, $35, $40 mugs. They're very popular, but it was so funny watching all of these people watching my cart. Like I've had times at this store where I've had items where I'm like, I'm going to make $400 off this item. Nobody even looks at it twice. But man, this Stanley cup got so much attention. Like I had girls like walking by my cart, looking at my cart, looking in like the bins, like they're all trying to find one. And I didn't know whether I was going to pick it up or not. So I'm texting my wife and she's not answering. I'm like, should I pick it up? Because I don't think it's necessarily worth selling. I could probably make $20 profit off of it. But it's one of those things that for $8 to pick it up, it's brand new. It's got all the cardboard still around it. It makes like a good gift. Like if we've got a baby shower or something coming up or a birthday. So to be able to pick up something like that for $8 and then, save yourself the money, it still was a good pickup. But what I cracked up with most was just how many people were watching my cart over this Stanley cup when, like I said, I've had things that are way more profitable. Nobody bats an eye at it. But it just goes to show how marketing and how trends have such a big impact on what it is people are wanting to pick up.
Yeah, and also it goes to show how much there's out there to source, right? Because like you mentioned, you walk around with something that's going to make you $400 and nobody bats an eye. And it's happened all the time. You go to an estate sale and you see this item. You're like, how has this been here for 3 weekends and no one has picked this up, right? So I always tell people there's always other opportunities around the corner. So keep an eye there. All right. Hey, before we move on, are you good? Is that your update? I don't want to cut you off. Okay. Hey, before we move on, though, listen, it's going to be Q3, it's going to be Q4, and you're going to be really busy. And one thing you want to make sure you are keeping on top of is your bookkeeping. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through My Reseller Genie. My Reseller Genie is reselling software for bookkeeping made by resellers for resellers. So if you haven't checked it out yet, make sure to check them out. You can use our link below and use our code Pure Hustle, and you'll get 15% off the first month. Again, use our code Pure Hustle, you get 15% off the first month, and it's going to allow you to import everything from eBay, keep track of how much you made, keep track of all your fees. So when tax time comes around, it'll be really easy. And in the meanwhile, it'll allow you to keep track of your profit and loss in business. So check out My Reseller Genie, link below. Use code Pure Hustle, 15% off the first month. All right, random story. So I don't know. A couple of things. These are just warnings. These aren't really random stories. First warning is, I don't know what's going on with eBay, but have you ever had it, Mike, where you sold something and you're like, I swear I charged shipping on that, but it's free shipping. Has that happened to you before?
You there, Orlando?
Yeah, I'm here. I lost you for a moment. Have you ever had? Hello?
Go ahead, man.
I'm still here. Have you ever had it when you sold something and you swore you had charged shipping, but it said free shipping? Has that ever happened to you?
I don't think so.
Oh, good for you. Okay. So it's happened to me multiple times, and it's happened to a lot of people, I'm sure. Let us know in the comments if it's happened to you. But this last week, I had 2 items. I accepted the offer, and then I go to ship, and it's like free shipping. And I'm like, what is going on here? Now, I'm willing to say sometimes operator error. Sometimes it's an item that you sold and no one paid for it, which still needs to get fixed, and you relist it, and sometimes they relist it with free shipping. I don't know how that happens. Sometimes maybe you hit the wrong button when you list something and you thought you charged shipping. But I'm pretty sure this item I had sold, it's one of my replenishables, and I have sold probably around 40 of these items, and I've always charged shipping. So for the fact that it didn't charge shipping was kind of weird. It happened to me with another item. So be aware that if you're going to accept an offer, it doesn't hurt. Maybe just quickly check, especially if it's a item that costs to ship. Or if it's like a shirt or like a small toy or whatever, like it's not worth it. Like, chances are everything's all good. But if it's something that's going to cost you, like I would check. The other thing is, and we've talked about this many times, is make sure to test shoes that are known to break down in storage before you ship them out. So shape-ups are notorious for this. I haven't sold a pair of shape-ups in over 2 years because every pair of shape-up I've ever used or ever sourced and I've never used shape-ups I ever sourced and sold, instantly I'll get a message by the time it arrives. Hey, I put these on, and after a few steps, the whole sole crumbled. Shape-ups, that happens all the time, so I stopped selling shape-ups. The other pair are Dansko shoes, and it wasn't always like this, but I find that lately it's been like that. And luckily, this buyer messaged me, and they said, hey, can you test it before you ship it? I've had 3 pairs I just bought from eBay over the last 2 months, and every single pair has crumbled by the time I've worn it for a day or 2. So sure enough, it's sold. I go get the pair, I do the whole bend test, and it breaks right in my hand. And I'm like, I'm so glad because I have free shipping. So I would have lost the money shipping there, and I would have lost the money shipping back. Right? So I'm so glad I tested it. So if you're sourcing Dansko or shape-ups or anything similar like that, make sure to test them when you source and make sure you test them before you ship out. That's my random stories. Just two PSA, 2 public service announcements.
That's good. That's good advice, man. That's the worst is when you get shoes. I feel like I used to do a lot of shoes, and I think there's still a big place for like sneakerheads or for very specific types of shoes. But yeah, man, especially because the longer they sit in storage too, I mean, they're just going to disintegrate and have issues. So if it's not a quick seller and it's not in pristine condition, and if it's a known brand like that, yeah, it's probably a good idea to be very, very careful with them. So mine is, we talk a lot on the podcast for people who are first starting reselling. One of the things that they should do is look around their house. All right, so before you're going out and even trying to source items and find things to sell, that is a skill, that is a separate skill set. But one of the skill sets you should gain is just, how do I operate eBay? How do I list an item? How do I take pictures? How does this shipping thing work? What is it like when something sells? All of that. And it's nice to do with items that you've already bought. You don't necessarily need anymore. Kind of consider it like having your own garage sale. Well, one of the things that I think happens a lot of times for resellers is they start off that way, and then they start sourcing a lot, and then they kind of forget about that as an option. And, we often do like spring cleaning type stuff in our lives where we go through and say like, let's get rid of old things, or you just become a hoarder and you're holding on to everything. But it's a good idea every so often to just kind of reconsider the things that you have and consider selling them. So I have a ton of board games, and some of them throughout the years I've sold. Some of them I keep for myself. I never plan on selling because I play them, every so often. But I used to play about 7 years ago or so. I used to play a game pretty competitively called Android Netrunner. And this was like, in my opinion, Android Netrunner is the greatest card game ever to exist. Magic the Gathering has a great following. Android Netrunner, though, is by far the most strategic, the most interesting dynamics in play. It's an asymmetrical game. And there was a pretty big scene in San Diego at the time. And then for whatever reason, Fantasy Flight, which, by the way, Bolo, Fantasy Flight makes pretty decent games. So if you're ever at a garage sale or an estate sale and you're not sure about board games, you see something that says Fantasy Flights, tends to be pretty decent. There tends to be a following for it. But for whatever reason, Fantasy Flights just decided one day that they were done making this game, because it was a game where like every month they came out with like a new cycle, And so it was a constant buying, kind of like Magic the Gathering. And one day they just were like, we're done. We're not making this game anymore, even though it was one of their most successful games. And so I stopped playing at that time. The scene died out. And since then, it's interesting because I kind of was like, I wonder whatever happened to Android Netrunner. Are people still playing? And so I looked it up, and it turns out that some fans have created like their own expansions to the game, and they use a website where they like actually design and print the cards, and so people are able to still like play the game, and they've reprinted with like new art and new stuff a lot of the old cards, and legally they're able to get away with it because of the way they operate their system. I don't know all the details of it, but there's still somewhat of a scene for the game, but because my cards were like the original cards of the game, they're pretty sought after. And so I'm looking up on eBay, and I just could not believe what these things are going for. Like if you've got like the unopened boxes or even just the regular boxes of the cards. And so I'm like, that's it. Like I'm going to go through my stuff. So I spent about an hour going through all of my Netrunner cards to figure out which sets I had, which was almost all of the sets that they'd released. I'm missing like one major expansion and then like 4 data packs. But I think I'm going to be able to sell these cards for like $450 plus.
Nice.
And this was just a board game sitting on my shelf that not a board game, it's a card game, but essentially a board game that I'm probably never going to play again because I don't know anybody that plays. The scene is dead, but there's still demand for it. And so I guess it's just random because I've had this money just sitting on my shelf that I'm never going to play this game again. And probably over the next 5 to 10 years, the scene will die out again. And then there's not going to be demand for this. Maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe like 10 years from now, like the old Netrunner cards are going to be worth like $500,000 a piece or something. But I'm not seeing a Pokemon resurgence in this because it was more of a niche thing. But it's just a reminder to, if you're a reseller, spend a little bit of time going back through some of your collections of stuff that you might not be interested in, because you never know. Prices could have gone up from when you were originally into something, but you might not be into it anymore. So don't be afraid to sell your own stuff, even as an experienced long-time reseller.
No, that's so true. I mean, I have stories like that. I haven't had it happen in a while, but there's some things I'll look at and I'm like, why do I even have this anymore? It's worth this amount. I'm not going to do anything with it. Might as well sell it. And I've done that with someone like my vintage starter jackets that I really enjoyed, because I'm like, I never even wear these anymore, you know? And listen, you can always get something again, right? It's not like you're selling something and it's gone forever. So just be aware of that. All right. Hey, before we move on, if you haven't followed us on social media, we are Pure Hustle Cast on Twitter, also known as X, and we are Pure Hustle Podcast on all other platforms. We're trying to build our X here a little bit, and catch us on live streams. And the way you can catch us on live streams, make sure to hit that bell notification on YouTube and also on Twitter. Make sure you have your notifications on Twitter or/X, so you're notified when we do live stream there. Also, if you want to give us a call, you can always give us a call at 619-738-1170. That's 619-738-1170. Or shoot us an email at purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. That's purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. And as always, grateful for all of you that support us, whether it be writing an iTunes review. So if you haven't done that, we greatly appreciate that. Or if you listen to the podcast, you haven't caught us on YouTube, come on over and hit that subscribe, smash that like, and hit that bell notification. And also, we do have a Patreon, and this Patreon is just a way to say, hey, Mike and Orlando, we love the podcast. We want to make sure that podcast continues. We're at 408 episodes, right? And Mike and I have no plans on ending this anytime soon. And one of the reasons that we've been able to keep doing this is because of our Patreon subscribers. So if you haven't had a chance yet, make sure to sign up, patreon.com/Pure Hustle Podcast, or go to the link below. And for $5.55 a month, you get to help us and also be part of the Pure Hustle Podcast Discord, where there's a thriving community of resellers that are always sharing information all the time, 24 hours a day. So come check us out. All right, let's talk about, we got some quick news here.
All right, here we go. eBay open registration beginning soon. Amazon Prime Day hit record sales and new eBay capital loans. All this and more on Reseller News. Orlando, take it away.
All right, so just giving everybody a heads up, we're not paid by eBay, but eBay Open is happening, I believe, in September, and registration opens August 1st. I am sad, though, because, again, they're still going with the virtual. Now, to me, eBay seems to be doing well. Like, financially, they seem to be doing better. But for a reason, they don't want to meet in person, and I'm not sure why. I think there will be those localized events. I plan on going to it if there is, depending on my schedule. I hope they have one in San Diego or LA.
I think if you go to a local event, you should go with a big like sign, like like at a rally, and the sign should say "immediate payment now." Immediate payment.
Like a sandwich board. A sandwich board.
Yeah, and you should just start, or like one that you hold up, like a picket sign, and you should just start a chant like during the speech, and just see what happens.
You know what? It wouldn't be a bad idea. I don't know how far I would get though, right? Because I'd have to be one of those protesters that like has a poster board that I fold and slide down into my pants, and then once I'm inside, then I bring it out and like I hold it up.
Well, like it could be on the outside of it. It could be like eBay open or hashtag eBay open 2024, right? And then like you just flip it, and then the other side is where it says immediate payment now.
It's crazy.
And you could just start the chant.
It's crazy you say that because it's been 2 years. 2 years since Jamie Ione said that they were going to fix it. 2 years, 2 eBay opens ago. And that's only when he said it. Before that, we can go a whole other decade. Like we can go to 2019 when you and I personally met with eBay execs and they said they were going to fix it. So anyways, it's just kind of funny. But I agree. eBay immediate pay, like anyways, I really do miss eBay Open in person. I love meeting people in person. So keep an eye on that. Register for that. It is free to register, so make sure you register. All right, I thought this was interesting. So Amazon Prime Day. Did you buy anything on Prime Day?
Yeah, a handful of things.
Okay.
Mostly personal stuff, just because my son's got a birthday coming up here, and so yeah, when like things. Here's what I realized about Prime Day: if the sales. Oh, did you notice? Okay, this is a little side note here, but did you see all of the like people posting on social media about Prime Day where they like caught Amazon or like sellers on Amazon raising the prices and then putting it on sale? So like
yes, that's exactly what I was going to talk about. Yes.
Yeah, so it showed the cost of the cart like on Prime Day, and it's like, look, I'm saving like 35% or 40%, and it's actually like 20% higher than it would have been if they just bought it like a non-Prime Day.
Yeah, dude, it was bad, because I went on there, and I've been looking for I've been looking for like some more like dressier kind of items, because I might be working back in an office and so on, and so possibly not, but that's for the future. And so I was like, hey, I wonder if I can pick up some slacks, some dress shirts, whatever. And it was like Prime Day deal, and I look, and it's like higher than the regular price I paid for, because the thing that people don't understand is you can go back to your orders, you can see how much you originally paid for something. So I go back and I'm like, wait, this is more expensive than what I originally paid. How is this a deal? And it happened again and again and again and again. I was just like, this is not cool. Like it was not. Now I didn't come, Mike and I didn't come here to rant about how people are trying to rip people off during Prime Day, but this was interesting to me, and I've said this before. So Amazon Prime Day had record sales, right? And Amazon never reveals how much money they make, right? They just reveal that they've, had record sales. But this is from CNET Money. Amazon Prime Day hits record sales boosted by buy now, pay later plans. And so I'm like, okay, that's not a good sign. Like if things are going really well because people are buying on buy now, pay later, which is basically on credit, that's going to be interesting. I think Q4 is going to be big, but maybe it's going to be because of buy now, pay later. So why am I sharing this? I'm just sharing this just to, prepare for the worst and hope for the best, right? Because the reality is I do think we're going to have a great Q4, but it could be because of everybody buying on credit. And the stats have shown, I think the latest consumer buying report showed that there's no stopping consumer buying. Like even though the jobs report hasn't been as great, even though, GDP has slowed down, all these different things, people are still willing to buy. And so you could look on the bright side and go, you know what? It doesn't matter. Q4 is still going to be amazing. Just people are going to pay different, which in the end doesn't affect us, right? Buy now, pay later is something that eBay deals with, something that Amazon deals with. We get paid, and that's all that matters. So I would say just keep moving forward, keep listing. If you're going to do Amazon, make sure you're sourcing, understanding that possibly you might have more returns, right? Because if you do a buy now, pay later, the problem with that is if somebody buys something and they're like, oh, I don't know if I can make a payment on this anymore, they could just return it, right? And then it kind of ends it. Unless I'm missing something with the buy now, pay later plans. But it's just like using a credit card. So anyways, I wanted to share that. It's interesting because I don't know. I feel like things are still kind of not the greatest. And this is one sign of that, but people are still making sales. So there's that. All right. And then speaking of, borrowing money, and I don't know where you land on this, but so eBay, they used to do like the PayPal loans. Like if you wanted to get a loan, you can do PayPal. And then they had another one through Lending Tree, I think. And, we're big on not taking any loans. Do I have our Totally Money Makeover book in here? Somewhere in here. We're very big on being debt free, but I also believe that could be a good thing to leverage your business, right? To make more money. And so eBay now, they have this eBay Seller Capital and Liberis partnership for small businesses. And I looked at the terms, and I don't make any money on this. I looked at this and I thought this may be something good. And I've mentioned before on the podcast how sometimes we leverage ourselves on Amazon, or sometimes we want to buy more inventory and there's a cash flow problem. But if there's a good opportunity, sometimes it helps. And so I thought this was interesting. So this seems like one of the better plans that eBay's had in a while. So there's no credit score impact. So it checks, and it's based on your store's performance. So if you make more than $50K a year, you qualify. Now, how much you qualify, I think depends on how much you sell. And then on top of that, there's no early payback fee. A lot of these things you got to be careful of because there's this early payback fee where they penalize you for paying your debt off early. And so your payment is based upon a pre-agreed percentage of your gross sales. So they just eliminate. So if you are a part-time seller, I think this is maybe something, if you want cash flow, you could look at, right? In the sense that if you're part-time, you're not leaning on that money to pay your bills. If you're a full-time seller, then it gets kind of tricky, right? Because, one of the things on here, I think what it said is that like you have to pay back no matter what, right? Which is most loans, right? It's not that you're going to be like, oh, you had a slow month, don't worry about paying this month. No, you still have to pay. But the reality is, sometimes you need a cash flow to build your business, to make your business stronger. Maybe you just need 5K, maybe you need 10K, but I throw that out there, just something to think about. I saw this new plan and I thought, this isn't bad. This is probably, I'll probably take advantage of this. I'm leveraged on a couple of my cards, and, because of the market, my interest rate's at like 21.99 that I carried over, which is insane. I remember when I used to have 6.99 and because of the interest rates. So, if you can get down, I saw some of the numbers on here were like they have offerings of 5.99 possibly. Like, that's good. Like, in the end, like if you're not careful with your loans, you're just paying interest, and you'll forever be paying on a loan. So any thoughts on that, Mike? Are you like, Orlando, this is a terrible idea that you came up with?
No, I mean, it really depends. I think it's a tough thing because the people who are at a position financially, wisdom-wise, and all of that to leverage loans, they really probably don't need our advice, right? Like, because they probably understand, they understand like how to leverage money, how to make sure that their interest rates are at a place where, they're not holding on to it, or that they're outpacing inflation, or that their profits are going to cover it at a certain point in a certain time frame. The hard part is, it's true, like the best businesses are leveraging debt, right? The most successful business people, because business debt is different than personal debt. The problem though is it's the people who kind of think like, hey, the most successful businesses and business people are leveraging debt, so therefore I should leverage debt, and they're not in a position to do that, and so they end up actually hurting themselves more long term. So it really is a case by case basis, and you really got to know what you're doing. It's one of those things like, yes, the most the most successful, like I think of like any sport, like the most successful like NASCAR drivers or the most successful bodybuilders, the most successful basketball players, like they do certain things, but that doesn't mean that the average person doing those things are going to have those same results, right? Like they do those things because they have everything else lined up perfectly that those things matter and make the difference. But if you're just the average person and you're like, oh, I heard Michael Phelps eats, like 10,000 calories a day and he's the best swimmer ever, so I'm just going to eat that much. Well, you do that, you're going to have bad results, right? Like that only works when you're in a position to make that work. And so, yeah, I think debt is absolutely a wonderful thing that can be utilized for businesses, even personally, if you know what you're doing, you know how to do it. But the problem is if Mike and Orlando are not going to be able to give you the kind of information you need to make an informed decision on how and when you should be leveraging debt. And so if you're listening to us and you're on the fence and you're not sure, you're not at a place yet to do that. Right.
That's a great point. I agree. And the reason I bring this up is because like in 2020, right, interest rates were at 0. And we even talked in the podcast, like if there's ever a time to borrow money, it's now, right? Because it was really good. And I ended up, I don't know how much I leveraged. I think I know I spent like over 100,000 easy. And I made that pretty back. I made it pretty quick. I made that back like I remember in Q4, I remember I had like a couple months where it was just insanity how much in sales I had. And that was pretty easy. And then we get to 2022 and I was expecting some of the same in Q4 and I leveraged myself out a lot and I still got that debt, right? That's what I'm still holding on to. From that business that I picked up, I sourced all these items. I thought they're going to be quick sellers, just like they were in Q4, and they're slow sellers, right? So, and that carried over, right? And I know I'm not the only one because I know when I bring this up in the Discord, there's a bunch of people who are like, yeah, Orlando, I got 30K, I got 40K, I got 50K, I have 5K. And so it's just the reality of Amazon selling. That's one of the reasons I kind of stopped Amazon selling, because if you really want to scale on Amazon, a lot of it means leveraging a lot. You know, I just saw a TikTok the other day of a guy that spent $60,000 on supplements to do Amazon FBA, and then there was an infringement, a strike. And so they couldn't now. So what do they do with that? Like, that's a huge expenditure, and that happens to a lot of people. Or you buy a lot of Nike on a credit card, right? You go to the outlet, you buy 100 pairs of shoes, and you're thinking there's going to be fast movers, and then out of nowhere, Nike gates you, right? Even though you have that inventory. Now, there are successful people like Matt Klein. Matt Klein has done an incredible job. We've had him on the podcast, and he sells Nike shoes, and he has not leveraged himself. He actually started from the bottom up, and he just kept building his business. So there's both ways to do it. I know Amazon sellers that are $1 million sellers that are highly leveraged, and I know eBay sellers that have no leverage and are just successful. So yeah, I agree with you, Mike. If you're waiting for us to, this is not financial advice. So if you're leaning on what we say to make that decision, you're probably not in a place to do it. So, but I thought I'd throw it out there. So, all right, let's talk about something that should work to your benefit here. Let's talk about bolos. Bolo. What's your bolo?
All right, so my bolo is kind of a generic one. I've been successful with this in the past, and we're coming to that time of year again, and that is the Olympics, right? So with the Olympics here starting really soon, if you've got gear, I mean, I feel like Olympics is like one of those things, like when you go into a thrift store, your local thrift store, whatever teams, like sports teams are local to your area, you just find tons of it, right? And I feel like Olympics is like one of those things that on off years, like random Olympic stuff, you can kind of almost find it a dime a dozen, and it's not, I mean, maybe not that frequently, but like you see stuff that's like Olympics, 2018 or whatever, and it's got the country in Beijing or Paris, and so a lot of times you pass on that stuff because there's just not a demand unless it's a really unique item. But for whatever reason, when the Olympics hits, old Olympic stuff tends to sell a little bit better, right? Like even though it's like a different year, it's a different, I don't know if it's just the media hype where like people are thinking about the Olympics, they go online, they're Googling stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, and then, so if you've got Olympic stuff, now's the time to potentially raise the prices up, maybe do the end and sell similar on Olympic stuff to get that pushed up in the algorithm, because now is just a time where it's going to be a little bit hotter sellers. So kind of a generic one, but I've in the past, like I said, I've done really well on like older vintage Olympic stuff that just sits there for a year or two, and then all of a sudden the Olympics roll around and it just starts flying off the shelf.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the Olympics because I wonder if WNBA stuff is going to go up in value, especially since the WNBA team just beat the Olympic team, which is kind of hilarious. Now, could it be just Caitlin Clark stuff? Could it be just Angel Reese stuff? I don't know, but it's definitely grown in size, and this is not a bolo, but just some things to maybe think about because WNBA stuff, hasn't been very popular, so obviously it's been very cheap to buy, but now maybe the opportunity to invest. I don't know, just things to think about. But that's not my bolo. So my bolo is different remotes. So what do I mean by that? So maybe, there's a remote for a certain fan, right? And somebody needs that remote for that fan. Or maybe there's the Bose remotes, right? Bose remotes, they sell for a good $30-$40 depending on the remote. Those sort of sleep, I don't know what kind of bed those are, but the ones with the numbers, right? Or the ones that you can adjust with the remote. Those sell for really good money. So don't just think of like TV remotes. Don't just think of DVD remotes. If there's a remote that's something different, right? Maybe it could be, a remote to, I don't know, some kind of locking mechanism, or maybe whatever kind of remote. Like, definitely do your research on those remotes because you just never know. I can't tell you how many times I have found a remote that was not a TV remote, it was not a DVD remote or a cable remote, and I've sold it for $40, $50, $60, $80, even over $100 because it's a remote that's pretty unique, right? Something, right? We've talked before about the Onkyo remotes, the Denon remotes, those kind of like sound system remotes.
Here's another one. Let me give you one.
Oh, yeah,
I lost a remote to a walking pad. Right, so like a under the desk treadmill or just like a walking treadmill. Okay. I got one of those, and it doesn't have any buttons on it other than an on and off switch. But when you turn it on, it doesn't do anything. You have to use the remote to make it work. But it's not like a name brand one that you could use with like an app, right? Like there's one name brand one that you can use where it like connects to the app. But the rest of them though, it's like infrared or like whatever it is that makes the remote work. And if you don't have that remote, it doesn't work. It will never work again, right? But that same brand, like if you can find one on eBay, which again, if it's a semi off brand where there's not just a ton of them on there, yeah, people are more than willing to spend. I was glad to spend $30 for a remote because I didn't want to spend another $120, $140 on another walking pad. So yeah, I mean, you can definitely kill it on remotes of just random type items.
Yeah, so keep an eye. Sometimes, if the item's like something that's worth $800, people are willing to pay like $100 for the remote. Right, because it's either get a new whatever that is, or just get the remote and you're good to go. So things to think about. All right, Mike, we're coming to the end here. What are you looking forward to?
I don't know. I'm kind of school's going to be starting up for me in a couple of weeks, and as much as I do well over the summer because I can do things that's unusual for me, different for me. Yeah. The reality is when you're in a routine, things just work better. And so I won't be able to do the Amazon store, return store as frequently because it's a Friday only. So it'll have to be like weeks I'm off from school. But I think I'll be able to actually get into more of a routine of like, okay, this is when I go to garage sales. Here's when I list my items. And I think that I'm actually excited to, I'm not say goodbye to the Amazon store, but to kind of shift back to like my regular reselling. Because I'm kind of getting burnt out there. I'm kind of ready to get back into the normal routines of garage sales every other weekend and Facebook Marketplace a little bit more because it works with my schedule at school. So yeah, I'm kind of excited for a normal routine to be starting up here pretty soon. What about you?
So I'm looking at what I put here, and I got to tell you, I am kind of excited to send a bunch of cars to PSA. Now I've had some cars already, but I had that huge haul, and I'm still going through it, and I've also had like some old Pokemon cards. I've had some Marvel cards, a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, I want to send these all at one time, right? I just don't want to do it sporadically. And so I'm looking forward to getting into the card market maybe a little bit and seeing, how they grade, how they come back. I do have some packs that haven't been opened and I'm just going to open them. I don't know if I want to do it on YouTube or anything. I just feel like there's too much not Pokemon. I feel like there's too much pressure. Like
Why you don't think you could just sell the packs as is unopened?
I could, but I don't know. I'm a little bit of a gambler, so I just want to see what I have in some of my packs, and so I think I'm gonna go through those and get them graded, and so we'll see what happens. Now, what I'll probably do is I'll probably open. Like for example, I have some golf cards. I've mentioned this before, like some Tiger Woods, and so I'm probably gonna open like a quarter of them and see what happens, right? And if I get some good cards, it's good, and if I don't, well, see, then there's the thing is, are they in the other packs? Right. So I don't know what I'm going to do, but I want to send some cards over to get graded and just see how that all goes. I'm looking for the garage. So I got to tell you, it's been terrible out here. Terrible. Like I'm talking about maybe there's like 8 good ones to go to on a Saturday just because it's been super hot. I'm not sure what's going on. And then I'm just looking forward to cutting down the amount of items in my store. I want to get down to under 2,000, and so I got to move inventory, right? I got to move inventory, but it's hard when you're listing inventory to move inventory, right? But you have to. That's kind of what you have to do. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, just looking forward to a lot of opportunities around the corner. I can't wait for sales to initially pick up for Q3 and Q4. Because that keeps you moving, right? That keeps you motivated. But I gotta say, I've enjoyed the fact that things have been slow, so I can spend time with my boys. I have one going off to college, and I have another one that's a teenager now, and things are changing, and so I'll accept the slow sales, spend time with my family, but they do need to pick up, so that's what I'm looking forward to. So, all right, hey, thank you everyone that joined us. I appreciate every single one of you for always tuning in, and as always, make sure to be real.
Be relevant.
And be reselling.
Peace.